Looking through old photos on my mother's laptop, I found evidence that my parents may not be my real parents. I, Michelle 26F, had a recent tragedy. My parents have always been a little eccentric. They always lived as minimally dependent on society as possible. This meant well water, their own sewer or septic system, solar and propane for power, etc. They were not conspiracy theorists, as most people who live like them are, although they did have many friends who were like that. They were living in a very old house that relied on propane for heating. Unfortunately, there was a breakdown with the water heater, and they succumbed to CO poisoning in their sleep. It's been a very difficult time for me. I am technically the one who figured out they had passed. My mother messages me every single day. When I didn't get one last week, I knew something was wrong and called for a welfare check. My boyfriend, while great when he can be there, has not been available much since the day I discovered their passing. So it's been a lot of dealing with this on my own. I feel like everything is happening so quickly that I haven't had even a minute to process what's happened. I made the trip to West Virginia this past weekend. After dealing with the aspects of their cremation, I headed to the house. I stayed at a nearby hotel, and by nearby I mean a 45-minute drive away, but during the day I was getting the house in order. It was just a little too much to stay in the house overnight by myself. My mother had saved a lot of mementos and photos. It was kinda of nice going through it. I should probably give some more background on my life at this point. My parents moved back here to West Virginia when I was 20. My grandfather, who I would see 1 or 2 times a year, took care of the place for 20 years while we traveled around the country for my father's work. My father would travel back here to visit my grandpa at the beginning of December every year, but my mom and I never came with him. When I did see my grandpa, he always came to us. My father made money doing doomsday prep work. He wasn't a prepper himself, but we would travel to various places like Montana, Utah, a lot in the Rocky Mountain areas actually, and he would do construction work on bunkers, security fences, outposts. My dad knew how to do all of this stuff. He had a few other guys he could call in and help him where necessary. He always told me he got these jobs because he would do the job for cash, no paper trail, and be discreet about everything. It was not cheap for these people. We were always moving though my childhood and I was homeschooled. I was never denied access to the internet or taught crazy things. My parents actually heavily emphasized self-reliance. I later realized they believed this to an extreme degree. You'd be surprised how fast I can fix car problems or how well I can throw knives. With that said, they did prioritize my health. I went to the doctor when necessary and was vaccinated. I'm only saying this because in my teen and adult life, whenever I tell people about my parents, and I only tell people I'm close to, they always jump to thinking they are crazy anti-vax, blow up the government type people. And they were not. As I got older I began to ask, beg really, that I get to go to real high school. My parents caved, and we moved to Burlington, Colorado. It was a bit of an adjustment, but I loved being around people for longer than a few months at a time. I did all the things a typical teen would do in high school. I made friends, had boyfriends, went to dances, played sports, and so on. After high school, I went to the University of Colorado on a pole vault scholarship. After college, I got a job near Boulder and met my now boyfriend. To get back to the point of this post, I noticed something rather alarming going through old pictures. My mother had a habit of backing up photos on zip drives. I was looking at photos labeled Michelle's First Thanksgiving. This didn't set off any alarms though until I started looking through Michelle's First Christmas. I was noticeably smaller. I know pictures can look different because of angles or whatever. No, I am smaller, every angle, every picture in comparison. I also have way more hair. Yes, it had been a month, but there was no way I grew that much hair in 30 days. All the pics before Christmas are in or around this very house. Starting that Christmas, they are of my parents' camper, and the various rentals and campsites we lived in until I got to high school going forward. Now obviously I don't remember this house at all, coming here for the first time when I was 20. But the pics make it seem like they just moved out overnight right around Christmas and never came back. On top of that, this one folder has me pulling my hair out. Of the literally hundreds of folders on the 24 or so zip drives, there is one password-protected locked folder. I am not tech-savvy enough to get into it, and it appears to date from the month of December 2013. I need to know what's in this folder. I've decided I'm going to overnight the zip drive to my boyfriend back in CO. He has some friends that think they may be able to hack into it. I guess the last thing I was to ask you all is, do I seem paranoid? Is this just grief? I feel bad questioning this, as I loved my parents very much. It just feels like something is off. I'll update in a few days if I get any news on the zip drive or if I find anything else. Update. 2 days ago my boyfriend, Aaron29M, sent me an email with everything that was in the protected folder. His friend was able to get into it. I am beyond disturbed. There were only 3 photos. One of the little girl in the Thanksgiving photos. She was dressed up in the prettiest little dress and shoes. Stuffed unicorn next to her. She appears to be asleep, although my mind is telling me it's a sadder reality than that. The second photo is of my mother holding the child in the dress. There are tears in her eyes. The last photo was of a wooden box. It had very ornate details on the front and sides. The picture, however, is kind of far away. When it came to making out the wording on the front, I couldn't at all, but I had my suspicions. I spent the whole night looking at these photos and many others. I think this was my parents' actual biological child. I think she died, and I'm starting to worry that they took me from somewhere. At first, I mulled over the possibility that I was a twin, but there are no photos with 2 babies. This new revelation has me constantly wondering if this child is buried in the spot. The spot is what I call this odd place on my family's land. It's kind of offset from the main house, where this old tree has grown. I never came here until I was 20, my father came back every year in early December. My mother was always somber during the time he was gone, and they would be oddly affectionate to each other when he returned. Not that my parents weren't affectionate with each other, it just always seemed more upon his return for a few days. Once they moved back here, I began to notice that the spot always seemed to have flowers on it. It would have a wreath at Christmas. I asked about it 2 or 3 years ago, and they both just said it was just a reminder of the family members, yes plural, that have passed. I always just accepted that as their way of remembering their ancestors. I did something yesterday that I really struggled with internally. I dug up the spot. I feel bad, especially because of what I found. I found the box. I didn't open it, I know what was inside. On the front, my name was carved into it. Michelle Kimberly Nolan. May 19, 2013 to December 5, 2013. This is the body of my parents' biological daughter. I realized I was adopted, or kidnapped, or bought. I went back to digging through my parents' house during the day, and looking at photos at night. I hadn't paid much attention to the other people in a lot of the photos. Then I took a closer look at my father's only photo from his time in the Marines. He never liked to talk about it, and I never pushed. This photo is of him and one other man. I looked through the photos of 2013, and this man is in a few from that year, including Thanksgiving. He first appears in my mother's photos in 2012. In all, he only appears in 10 or so pictures. Today, I made the decision to visit my grandfather. He lives in a nursing home and has Alzheimer's. I wasn't expecting much. He apparently has some moments of being lucid, but those are very few and fat between. The nurses did tell me he will occasionally speak of things that happened decades earlier. I went there hopeful to find out anything about this man. My grandfather wasn't able to say much of anything, he just kind of sat there as I talked to him. However, when I put the picture in front of him and pointed at the man, he began to nod a little. Eventually, he started to mumble, and finally get more clear, Chris. He just kept saying it over and over, Chris, Chris, Chris. I was a little shaken honestly, and I wondered if this man still lives around here. As I passed by the nurse's station on my way out, one asked me, "How was Mr. Nolan today?" I said, "Oh, as good as expected." "Can I ask if you have ever seen this man?" My grandpa said his name is Chris. The first nurse said no, but the second nurse who came over to look grew bright-eyed. "Oh my God, I have to look, I swear that's him." She pulled her phone out and began looking something up. Oh my God, I was right, that is Christopher Curry. I'm a huge true crime fan, I would recognize him anywhere. I was startled by that. Who is he? She was more than ready to tell me everything. Christopher Curry, from the Merry Christmas Massacre. He burned his whole family alive on Christmas Eve, shot his sister a bunch of times, she actually survived if you can believe it. Kidnapped her baby, whose body they never found. Then turned himself in. Oh my God, it's like my favorite case. He only lived like 3 towns from here. You should watch the Netflix documentary on him, it's called Burning Lies. I thanked her and cut the conversation short. When I got back to my hotel room, I got on Netflix and searched up the documentary. I just finished watching it. It is literally the most horrible thing I've ever seen. I cried through most of it. When they showed the picture of his sister Alicia holding her baby, I paused it. That is the same baby from my first Christmas photo in the camper. I am Ivy Rose West, I am the baby he took that night. How were my parents okay with this? They had to have known what he was going to do to those people. I get grief over the loss of their baby, but to go along with that. I feel sick, I can't even breathe. They were so great and yet they let him do that. How? I don't know what I am going to do next. I'm retrieving their ashes tomorrow, and I am supposed to spread them on the spot. That's where they always said they wanted to be put. Now I know why. It's all so fucked up, I really wish I hadn't gone looking. Update. I returned to Colorado and told my boyfriend about everything I figured out. We watched the documentary together. He remarked on how much I looked like Alicia. I hadn't even really thought about that the first time as I was so preoccupied on the baby girl. We had a few long discussions about what my next move would be. There were 2 things I wanted to do. Alicia West, who changed her name after the documentary 15 years ago to Alicia Curry West, now makes her living as a public speaker. She mostly travels to high schools, giving speeches on honesty and adversity. I know that sounds ironic, considering how this whole thing started. I was looking on her website and she tells a very similar tale to the documentary. Her personal statement talks about how she owns her past lies and gives inspirational speeches about being honest and the potential consequences of deceit. Seems appropriate. Their tagline is "From self-centered to selfless." There is also a lot about overcoming adversity. How she overcame the loss of her child and family. About recovery from her gunshot wounds, and how she faced Chris Curry in court. It looks like she takes donations and is big on supporting victims of domestic violence. She has a whole foundation dedicated to ending family violence, and the public speaking appears to be the main fundraiser. It's all very over the top, but I guess when you go through all of that and come out other side, it's hard not to be. There is a full section dedicated to finding her daughter, Finding Me, with a reward offer, old pictures, and aged pictures. It's kinda what I look like. I took the contact information for the Finding Ivy section and sent an email to it. I included some of the photos from my parents with Chris, and photos of me from Christmas that year. I wanted her to know I was serious. That I wanted to meet and would be happy to get a DNA test. I included my phone number in the email. About 6 hours later, I got a call and it was Alicia herself on the other end. She was crying. Then I began to cry. My boyfriend was listening but stayed quiet. We talked and talked. She asked me all about my life. I could tell in her tone she had a vile opinion of my parents. I can't blame her, they allowed this to happen. We agreed to do a paternity test. She said she would happily pay for it. When our call ended, her assistant came on and gave me all the details I would need. I just had to submit my sample to a local lab, give them Alicia's code, and we would have immediate results. The next day, I did just that and lab tech told me it was a perfect match. Alicia was my mother. I guess she had a notification set up because I got a call immediately. She sounded almost hysterical and wanted to fly me out to Chicago as soon as possible. I was already on day 9 of my 10-day bereavement. I called my boss. He listened to my entire fantastical story and told me he couldn't give me any more bereavement but would approve PTO for as much as I had earned. I decided to take it. I had about a month's worth. I called Alicia back and said I'd be glad to come to Chicago, but I wanted to make a stop first. She asked where, and I told her it may be triggering. She just said back to me, Fort Madison. I said yes, I want to confront my uncle. She asked me to wait. She wanted to talk to me about something important first. She booked me 2 tickets for the next day, first class to Chicago. Erin came with me, and Alicia had a car pick us up at the airport. Her office was amazing. When Erin and I arrived, we did all the usual pleasantries. Alicia hugged me and seemed like she didn't want to let go. She looked incredible for someone who was 51 years old. After the introductions, she asked Erin for some girl time. We talked for hours about everything. Pole vaulting, high school, my upbringing, her family, my real father, her job, my job, and so on. It was really great to get to know her. She did have a bit of an arrogant vibe, but being a successful philanthropist I guess comes with a little bit of that. Alicia insisted that we stay at her house. It was huge. I couldn't believe she was making this much. I asked her about it and she said it was Netflix money. The next day I awoke early and she was happy to see that I was up. She asked me to come into the office with her. She gave me a bit of tour of her operation. I met some of the people. They didn't seem as friendly/happy as I would have expected people doing the selfless work they do. Although I guess they work with a lot of victims of domestic violence, and I'm sure that takes its toll on them. After the tour, Alicia sat me down and told me she had a business proposition for me. I was a bit surprised. She began talking about how Burning Lies had been one of the most popular documentaries in Netflix history, and that when she contacted them, letting them know we had been reunited, they were eager to do a follow-up. It would be a lot of money for both us. I think she could see the uncertainty in my eyes, because her whole tone changed. She started talking softer. I could tell she was trying to empathize with me. I asked her what this would entail. She said they definitely want to do an interview with the 2 of us together, and they'd like to film your confrontation with Chris. I was really apprehensive about this. I had no idea how I would react when I actually saw him in person. She assured me that I would be safe in every way. Erin could be there, she would be there, whatever I needed. She also told me it was unlikely I would get my chance any other way. Chris had denied Alicia numerous times over the years, even during the documentary. If Netflix was involved, the higher-ups at the prison would make Chris do it, but without that it was unlikely I'd get an audience with him. I told her I needed to think about it. She said that was expected and to take my time. Erin and I are both here in Alicia's house now. He's relaxing while I type this out. He's been no help. He just tells me do what I think is best and he backs me 100%. While I appreciate that, I really just want somebody to tell me what to do right now. I am so conflicted, this is so much all at once. 2 weeks ago I was Michelle Nolan and had just lost my parents in a tragic accident. Now I'm Ivy West and I've got a major studio wanting to watch while I confront my mass murderer uncle. I don't know what to do. I need to know if this is the right thing to do. A big part of me wants to do this, but I'm also terrified. Update. My life is so far from where it was just a few months ago. I'm about to head to the airport and board a private plane to Fort Madison, where I will come face to face with a mass murderer. They keep assuring me I'm in no danger. There are guards, he will be chained, and he has been a model prisoner for 25 years now. Like all that is supposed to make me feel better. So much has happened since my last post. The pressure kept up the very next morning after Alicia proposed doing the Netflix update. Alicia had a million reasons why this would be good for us, and when she told me the estimate payout for it, I was mind blown. This could really set me up. I didn't last long and agreed to be part of the project. There were lawyers on the doorstep that very week and we were locked in. That's when things took a swift nosedive. You know when you should trust your gut, but don't, because what you're being sold or shown or promised is just too good to pass up. Well, if that was a person, it would be Alicia Curry West. Shortly after inking the Netflix deal, she came to me with a job offer. She wanted me to go on the road with her, doing the public speaking engagements and raising funds for the foundation. She sold it to me in so many ways. We could make up for lost time, we could really make a difference in kids' lives, we could honor my birth father, we could possibly get other TV deals, she would start me out at $100K a year, and much more. I didn't know what to say. I had been at my job for 3 years at this point, but that would be a huge raise. I ended up accepting, and told my boss that I wouldn't be returning. After I accepted, Alicia asked if I'd start calling her mom, and I agreed. I still had this sneaking feeling that something was off, but I ignored it. I mean, I had my real mom, she was rich, and she wanted me to have the same life she had. I began going to work with her the very same day. Over the last month, we have mostly been planning speaking engagements and talking about the angle we would take. The thing that bothered me was she wanted to play up my life as really negative. It's like she wasn't lying about how I grew up, but wanted it to seem like I was abused, neglected, and mistreated. Always focusing on moving around, living in campers, denied access to society, she even wrote statements that implied physical abuse. I don't know what to think of Val and Kim anymore, but they were not evil. They treated me great and raised me the best they could. I don't want them slandered. It was after the first week of working with her that I really started to take notice that she was very self-centered. Her assistant seemed like she was always on the verge of tears and trying to anticipate Alicia's next move. She wasn't very nice to any of the other staff members either. I tried to be friendly with them, but they all seemed to get really nervous around me. After overhearing someone talking about how the bitch denied my raise, but brought her new little pet in at 3 times my salary, I began to wonder how much of her company/foundation was really dedicated to helping victims. I have a financial/accounting background. I went to Alicia about 2 weeks in and asked to look at the company finances, under the guise of trying to maximize our intake, which is weird because this is supposed to be a nonprofit. She agreed, which I was surprised. She had only known me a few weeks, and I could get the vibe she was trying to be a mom, but to just let me get into anything I wanted seemed naively generous. Going through the books, I felt sick. It was all just a front really. Her whole marketing was that she was out in the schools, out in the neighborhoods, preaching doing the right thing. The reality was, speaking engagements were rarely done at all. In fact, from what I can tell, the dozen or so events she does at high schools and shelters a year appear to just be a marketing ploy. She makes most of her money from donations doing do-gooder events and dinners for rich people who want tax write-offs. I thought, okay, if this gets people more resources, more help, then I guess that's still worthwhile. I know the real world isn't all rainbows and butterflies. Maybe she backed off on the speaking and did more foundation event stuff because it gets more for the victims. No, not true. As I started doing the math on the disbursements, it seems only about 9% of every dollar collected goes to actual victims. This is a foundation that brings in close to $2.5 million annually. And last year only $210,000 went to any victims organization. I started looking deeper. The people who work here aren't getting paid anything. She offers a pretty good starting salary, but looking through the employee records, raises are few, far between, and slim at best. The operating costs were high, with most of that being in the form of fancy events to impress her rich donors. The largest piece of the pie appeared to go to Alicia. She listed as having a salary the same as the employees. But, she lives in a company home, has 3 luxury company vehicles, gives herself a ridiculously high per diem for any time she's out of the office. In the past few years she has traveled 4 conferences, speaking engagements and company retreats to San Francisco, Paris, Tokyo, and a number of other places. When I asked about it, she didn't get defensive, she didn't angry, she didn't try to lie. She was proud, she bragged. She started laying it all out. Going out and taking a few for the team at a high school always meant bigger donations at the dinners and socials. She went on and on about how to max out donations. I think she was under the impression she was teaching me something. When we talked salaries, she explained, never pay someone the minimum, they'll always leave, because they can and not lose anything. You want to get them in with a good offer, then keep them through their own necessity. You got to give them just enough to live a little, just enough to make them reconsider leaving. Then you've got them for good. Her unethical business practices aside, I asked her how she felt about the people she was supposed to be helping. She didn't even comprehend what I meant. She truly believes she is doing everything she can for the victims, and that her foundation does everything it can for them. I asked about all the amenities she gives herself, and she said, it's just her pay, she dedicates her life to helping others, she's earned all this. This woman is a total narcissist. Over the next couple weeks I did my best to contribute and be her little protégé. I was so appalled by what I had learned, I knew I had to do something. I didn't really know what, but something. That has meant weeks of playing along with Alicia. Here's a recap of things I've learned. She has had just about every form of plastic surgery, all medically necessary and covered by her company, of course. She also offered to get me new boobs, saying, you're young now, but a little enhancement never hurt. She planned a 4-day company retreat to Aspen, because I'm from Colorado, and when I asked why would we go there in the summer, she just said to consider it a birthday present. I said my birthday was in May, she said, no, it's not, it's July 9th. I hadn't really thought about that. Her plan was Aaron could join us. I said we should invite some staff as a thank you, and she laughed, saying she never brings any of them. I pointed out that I had noticed others on previous retreats in the records. That's when she explained that she will often hire a guy she wants to fuck, her words exactly, a few days before, then take him on these company retreats, then let him go when they get back. I got dealt a huge loss though on the trip. I was sleeping in this way, to extravagant Airbnb. When I hear a huge commotion from the bathroom. Aaron is there in a towel, Alicia is topless, holding her big fake boobs, trying to cover her nipples. Aaron is telling me she came in there like that, the shower is clear glass. He says she was asking him if he needed any help and to show her what he's got. Alicia is denying everything, saying she was getting herself ready and came in topless by accident, and that's when Aaron came on to her, asking her to join him. I know he wasn't lying. He was so upset. It came down to an ultimatum. Him or her, I wanted so much more with him, but I couldn't let her keep doing this. I had to say goodbye to Aaron. I still didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't just let her keep taking advantage of people. He left the trip, I tried to reach out, but I'm blocked. Goodbye, Aaron. This ended up being a blessing though. She now trusted me completely. I told her that we should do a PR campaign on our reunion. She loved the idea. We did this whole workup called I Am Ivy West. I also suggested we make it legally official, that I am her daughter. She was happy to do this, her lawyers made quick work of the process. We finally got to our first filming. It was going to be 3 filmed parts, an interview with the both of us. Then one with us and Chris. Last, a follow-up interview with us on our thoughts about facing Chris in person. The first interview was horrible. It was so much bashing of my parents, Val and Kim. Painting them as monsters. Alicia kept speaking for me when they would come up. The narrative she was pushing was she was saving me from my past. It was sick. Yes, they did something horrible, but they weren't horrible to me. But yet again, I had to go along with it. I keep telling myself if I want to make it all right, I have to keep going, but it's getting hard. The car is waiting for me. The next test is here. Wish me luck, and I'll update when it's over.